Neil, we're back.
We're back. You would? Okay, go back. Go ahead.
Well, it's a rare show, Monday night.
Monday night show.
I don't know if we've done Monday night shows before.
No, but we have to accommodate the Sir Mark Andreini. His night shift.
His calendar is our calendar. And so we've changed up the game a little bit.
Right. And thank you. Thanks to Laura, too, for letting us do the show.
True. Yeah, it's a rare Monday here at the boardroom. You watching on Santa Cruz Waves, all of our friends out there, thanks for tuning in. We got a great show. Mark Andreini's back. We're going to talk about the 90s.
No, we've done two shows of three.
Well, we've covered 3 or 4 decades.
We've done like 4.
How about
We've done
that?
2 or 3 shows.
Working our way.
You want to check them out there on YouTube. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th show.
Third.
We're going to do the 90s tonight. We do the 90s.
Third. This is the third one.
And we may drift into today because you and your brother Pete, who's here, as a fact checker.
He checks facts.
Okay.
Make sure you don't lie.
Yeah. So we got an instant phone a friend.
That's right.
But you both brought your boards, your personal boards, and we'll talk about that a little bit. That might get us up into today a little bit.
Kind of.
But for those of you who are watching, like Neil said, you can watch those previous shows. But you've been doing this a long time. That's
1971.
Well, yeah, but earlier, 68.
Okay, on the
71.
Let's see, first lie. There we go.
The
bus is 1971.
I always hate to lie.
fact checker.
71 is when I used my own name.
Ah.
So I started in 68.
What were you before?
I had all different brands.
Joe Schmo?
No, we never would use our names. We would make our own logos. Cool.
Were you an eagle?
Yeah, I've done eagles and, moon art. It was all hippie art.
Well, that's why I was...
Peter Max.
Yeah, that type of stuff. So I'd always make my own logos, and I decided to just use my name to keep it simple, and that was in 1971. So that's why it says since 71.
Okay.
Since 71 is when I used my own
Your
name.
own name. Okay. All right.
That's all that meant.
And did that help sales when you did that?
It never made any difference.
It didn't?
No, it doesn't make any difference.
But the chicks recognized it. Fact check. Yeah. Did it work?
I think he lost sales.
Yeah, I made a lost sales.
Oh, he's out of prison.
I think I lost some of my favorite boards over some of those incidences.
Do surfboard
All those
shapers
hammer marks
get?
in 'em?
Do they get more chicks than surfers? Like do we have a? Can we fact
The
check
difference between a regular surfer and surfers who make their own boards is we spend half of our time making new boards for ourselves and the other half surfing, so we have less time for those sort of frivolities.
True that.
That's right.
That was a very
That's right.
smooth answer.
Yeah.
Fact check.
His wife's watching.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, the wife.
Yeah, that was a wife answer. Okay. What's her name?
Which one?
Your wife. The wife that you have today.
Betty Jean.
Okay, Betty Jean.
Okay, Betty Jean.
Yeah, we won't.
We're off to a tough start.
Yes.
We're not starting in the 90s. We're starting in 2023. Now we're going to go reeling back.
Back to Venezuela.
She has more than one.
Never mind.
Okay.
Betty, don't worry about it.
Before we start, what do you think of the board collection here in the boardroom?
There are some of the more unique boards. Most board collections have all the classic, I gotta have a Jacobs and a Hobie and a Dewey Weber and all that. But here you have some Tilton Seltzers, and you have Olsons, really early O'Neills. Most people don't have O'Neills in their collections. A Croteau, I love Croteau. Mm-hmm. And who's the guy with the small wedge stringer? I always forget his name. Schofield?
Which one?
Not Schofield. The one next to the
Tilton Seltzer?
The one on the
Winterburn.
other side of Winterburn.
Yes.
Winterburn is a super underground guy. He made very few boards, like for 1 year. But he's really made an impact on the early Santa Cruz surf culture here. So to see these kind of boards, for me, is extra special. And of course, a Balsa Johnny Rice.
Right.
Can't go wrong with that.
Oh, the Balsa Johnny Rice.
With 12 redwood stringers.
Yeah. So, so I love stuff like this because you don't see it. Every other collection doesn't have any of these. Maybe in an O'Neill.
Right.
But none of the rest of them. So that's what I like to see.
Your knowledge, though, just hearing you talk about these boards, you dig this stuff.
Oh, I studied every surfboard that was ever made since I started in '61, and we were buying used boards, Pete and I, that were made in the late '50s. So we had Flaherty's and Eichert's and really obscure boards that that you wouldn't think about today. Very few from Southern California except for Flaherty. Flaherty, I Googled where it's in Hermosa Beach, and we had a lot of Flaherty's in Santa Barbara. They're really beautiful with the checkered wood fins.
I've never heard that is in your travels has Flaherty come up?
Never, ever,
Wow.
ever. But we owned several of them, and I would restore boards as a kid. He'd wreck them, I'd fix them.
Hey,
We were his teamwork.
is that still happening? He
Yeah,
wrecks them and you fix them?
Yeah.
See, how is it knowing about his knowledge on these boards? How is it for you? That are in your shop. How is it for you?
It's
his knowledge about the board.
It's really rare that people come in because you're right. There's some obscure stuff here
Right.
that's not at the forefront of collectability,
Right.
but at the forefront of design, in my opinion.
It is,
And it's very
yeah.
rare that people come in here with that knowledge.
Right.
And I love history and the history of surfing,
There
so
you go.
I feel like it's really cool. And I was
Right.
enthralled by your knowledge. And I mean, like Doug was in here. Doug Howe
Right.
was in here, and he looked up at that Olson, and he was like, "I shaped that."
Yep.
And so there are people with that type of knowledge, but
And
I-
Doug
it's-
Hout is the master of the rail. He was an understudy of Mike Diffenderfer because he spent time at Diffenderfer Shaping Room in Encinitas in the would be early '60s. He told me he would sit between Mike Henson on one side shaping and Diffenderfer on the other side.
wow.
It was maybe Gordon and Smith. I don't remember where it was, but he was inspired by Diffenderfer, as was I, because of the beauty of his boards. And so that Diffenderfer is all about the rails. And so Doug's boards were always absolute masterpieces and always about the rails. And so the Olsons that were shaped by Doug Hout all have really nice rails, and all the rest of them have a big, exactly a C rail, just like that, every single one of them. And they're just a standard log. But I've only seen one Olson shaped by Hout. That's number 2.
Wow.
That's how rare they are.
Interesting.
He's only there not even a year.
Right.
And then, because he started Hout in '65, so that would be '64.
Wow.
roughly.
See, that's
Well, you
a,
tell
No,
me.
that's yeah. Well,
What
I
did he
honestly,
say?
I don't remember him saying a date on it. So that's.
But
I mean,
he-
obviously,
it
you can
did-
tell by the fit.
Don't ask him because when you get to that certain age, you don't remember any of this.
He just puts his shoulders up. He's like,
I don't remember. Yeah, I can just see him. Don't ask him. That's why they keep me around. I'm just not old enough yet that I still remember all this stuff.
you are
They
very
keep me around.
sure.
Does it-
I give you that, Mark.
does it, you knowing all this stuff, the history of the sport, does it piss you off that all these people surfing nowadays don't know nothing about the sport
No.
and they're just
No.
they're surfing plastic goddamn surfboards?
No. Instead of being mad, you can never complain unless you have a solution, right? And so that's why I wrote the book. So I wrote this book.
Segue.
It was only I brought this to remind myself of what we're going to talk about. But the reason that I wrote it was because people asked me for decades 1,000 questions about, well, what about this design and what about that design? And it's like, if I had to answer all those questions, I'd only make about 5 boards a year. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
I'm just going to write it all down and just have these white papers. And I wanted to publish them. And being a board builder, everybody, and all the magazine editors, I make their boards at one time or another, right?
You mean what?
Like the
boards?
magazine editors,
Yeah.
pretty much all in the U.S.
Yeah.
At one time or another, I make their boards, so I know them all, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, I have connections. I sent them all my explanation of all the history of board design. Every one of them, I'm talking like the Journal and Surfer magazine, it's like, Andreini, just put that on your website. People don't want to read this stuff. And I was like, I was crushed. And so, and my wife, she's classic. She says, well, people, they want to read about people,
Yeah.
So I said, I'm not going to write a book about myself. That wasn't the point. And I didn't. So I thought I was inspired by Greg Knoll wrote a book, a surf book, surf history, and I have all the history books. And he had all these cool stories where his friends would roast him and do a little sidebar. And I said, I'm going to do that. But I took it 10 steps further, and I have like 19 guys in here who gave me their stories and their photos, and so they could be the stories about the community, you know, and the people that were connected to all these great milestone board building techniques, not techniques, but design. So all the building block guys are in here because I knew them. And I got, the few that I didn't know, I got to meet because of the book. Like
Are there still printable?
Oh yeah, they're in print.
And is that any Google it? You can get this.
Yes, yeah. Just go online
gift.
and just Google Andreini surfboards, and it's for sale on the website.
Pete, what's different about his boards than any other surfboard builder that's around nowadays? Even the more classic, like the
Aqua Dynamics.
Huh?
Aqua Dynamics.
Okay, Aqua Dynamics.
Can you give the Cliff Notes of Aqua
an
Dynamics?
explanation on that?
So
Is that like when you put like a boat in one of those those things that they send the water?
You see if the tanker flips in the tank?
Yeah.
you have V hulls for that go deep in the water. They're very seaworthy. You have flat bottom boats that are very fast. You have all different types of watercraft to do different type of things, and surfboards are exactly the same as boats. They all do a specific type of thing.
Right.
It's the entry rocker on his surfboards are very neutral. They allow you to get in the wave without interference. Even late takeoffs, very just like forgiving. Then the rail kind of turns up a little bit here. There's a little bit of hull on the entry. Nice and friendly, and then as the board progresses back, then the performance is in this end, the friendliness is up here, and your feet are somewhere in between, you adjust. And so if you want something that performs,
Yeah.
you can do anything that your mind tells you to do without any hang-ups.
Right.
If you want something for big waves, I think some of the guys right now who are prolific big wave riders are blowing their mind with this. It's a very old design, but it's a very new in the water that he has worked out with George Greeno. It's in the book, isn't it? I hope so.
And you can how can one get the book?
You just Google
Google.
Andreini surfboards. It's on the website.
And what are we googling? Andreini surfboard.
Andreini
Okay,
surfboards.
the name of the book is
The Gift.
The Gift.
It just comes right up. Yeah.
Huh?
It
And if you
comes
mention
right
off the video show, you get 10% discount.
Well, what's interesting about Pete's saying is the type of stuff that in today's world people don't know.
No.
They're buying boards by models and
Right.
names.
Or by the outline.
Yeah, it's like they're
Just
not
by
really
outline.
even thinking about that. And it's funny that you use like the boat synopsis because, like you said, a deep V cuts through chop. It doesn't get the economy in a boat like a flat bottom does, skimming across the pond. And
Yeah.
having a combination of that is kind of, I think, maybe your secret sauce.
It is. Yeah.
So,
Huh.
It is. Yeah.
today's March 6, 2023.
Can I answer this question?
What?
March 6th, 2025.
When am I going to get? When's my board getting ready?
I knew it.
When's my board?
I gave him 2 years. Is that good?
25.
years?
25.
25.
We'll fast track you. Here's my deal.
How much
You don't-
fast
you
track?
don't-
You got extra little bit
No.
extra money on the
You
side.
don't qualify for this. If you're over 70,
Yeah.
I don't make you wait because you don't have that much time.
So by front of the
That's
line,
true.
the oldest guy goes to the front of the line.
Come on in. Excuse me, madam. Come on right up here.
So the old
Leave your
farts-
walker. We'll assist you.
The old
and we bring
farts
them up.
go. The old
Yeah.
farts go to the front of the line.
They do. Yeah.
I
That's a
always
special.
knew
that's
that,
never
like,
been. That's not publicized.
50
No,
bucks
I'm
and a
sure.
12-pack of beer got you to the front of the line. That
Those
was-
guys don't eat
I'm a
green bananas
financial
either.
manager.
No,
and his
right.
They can't afford to buy green bananas.
Pete, let's talk about your board. What is this? It's a 7
It's
what?
a flame.
This is a 7.0 twin fin.
7.0 twin fin. This is your everyday board?
Can we pick
Or
that up?
one of
I
them?
have 3 of them.
Okay.
They're all the same.
Let's want to
6'2".
see an outline of
That's
this.
the big wave board, really, for him.
This is a board that you ride in bigger waves.
Right.
It looks like it would paddle great. The volume of this, yeah, you're not
That really
a heavy
helps,
guy.
especially when you're over like 55.
And yeah,
This
definitely
is
helps.
the AARP special.
Yeah.
And I like how you did white pigment on this. That's
Old
cool.
school.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that a lot. And what's this? What's this?
That's a dove.
And is that something that you cut out of somewhere and found?
Yeah, I used to be very quiet in the water, and when people were rude, which is not hard to find, I would not be quiet anymore.
Oh, okay.
So people paid the price sometimes for being rude.
What would be the first 6 words that left your mouth?
Oh, yeah, okay. You need to put the screen on. Can you like?
I'll beep it out.
What would be the first 6 words that left your mouth after
We
you?
don't want the we don't want the DA to hear this either.
No, I think the statute of limitations have passed, and this dove it symbolizes
Yeah.
a transformation within my inside.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a reminder that they can do whatever they want, and that's on them.
Yeah.
And there's a 50-50 chance it'll remain just on them.
So this is like,
Better not burn me twice.
so you look at this and it calms you down? Does it work?
Yes.
All right.
It has on occasion, not often, because I already bring it out there with me. If I can't take it anymore, I just go in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Good
it's
move.
true. It's a good
Yeah.
move. Yeah,
And over
it's a
here,
good move.
we have your personal board also,
Yeah,
Mark, right here.
this is my glider, and I love gliders. I was going to talk about that as part of the '90s because this is the
Okay,
Glider.
look at the back of that. Look at that
this
TC.
is Thomas, my
Oh,
good
Campbell.
friend Thomas Campbell.
Yes, absolutely.
Painted this for me, and he's a big part of the '90s
Hang on.
story.
You get that in the camera.
Well, it's almost like getting Thomas Campbell to paint a surfboard. What does that cost?
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a price that isn't really have to do with dollars.
well, I'm just saying is he's a very well known Thomas
Oh,
Campbell,
he is.
very well known artist, filmmaker.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a cool dude.
He's done a lot for me, and so we do exchange. We're more like us guys were like barter. It's
Right.
all barter stuff.
Does anyone ever stop you and say, "Wow, look at that Thomas
All the
Campbell
time.
paint job"?
Most people don't know that it's a Thomas Campbell, but I get a ton of compliments as recently as the last time I had it under my arm.
Huh, that's
I
cool.
surf it all the time. So I normally do not ever have a polished, pretty board.
Very polished.
Every time I make one for myself, I always hate it because I didn't put enough rocker in it, or I did some stupid thing, and I sell it. So I said I'm only going to make clear, ugly boards for myself. And this was one of the very few boards that I've had that actually is beautiful, and I love surfing it.
What blank is this? Is this
Meaning the size of the
the
blank?
company that produces?
Oh, I
blank?
use only U.S. blanks.
It's a U.S. blank because I noticed
Yeah.
the stringer's real
Well, I
dark.
choose all those.
Yeah.
This is all me. The rocker, everything I do with U.S. blanks. They used to run Clark Foam, who I've been with since '71, and so they have my rocker profiles, and I use these darkwood stringers because I like the beauty of them because they're old school.
They are. No, it's very.
That's
It's
right.
honestly, it's quite rare to see dark wood like that.
Right?
And what's this little? Is that pencil?
Yeah, it's all pencil.
And what is this? What's this represent here?
I don't know. That's Thomas.
Oh,
He's
Thomas put that on there.
Oh, this is all Thomas.
Okay,
It's
all
got
right.
Vaqueros de las Olas, and I can't read it all. It's doodles,
Wow.
for Marky Mark, via Muckluck, he's got all of his cool stuff all over it.
Very cool board.
Timo.
Yeah, this is. I'm impressed.
So let me tell you about the '90s.
Here we go. 90s.
The '90s. This is a really short but a very cool story. So we all know about the '80s. The twin fin, like your Jeff Ho you just brought in.
Oh yes, yeah.
Becomes the thruster because Simon Anderson spins him out. We all know the story. Reno Abalera did it first. Then Mark Richards pulled the tail in so he could ride better weights. He wins 3 world titles, 87, 88, 89, I think. When was Tommy? Was Tommy before him or after?
Tommy was after.
So
Yeah.
Tommy was like 89, 90, 91.
Yep.
And then when was Kelly? When did Kelly first start winning? This is all part of the '90s story.
Right. I don't know. That's a
I
good
could
question.
I could be back. Mark Richards may have been like 85, 86, 87, and then Tommy, I think, was late 80s.
I think Mark Richards
Fact
was
check,
before
hang on,
that.
fact check here.
Fact check.
No, I,
Well, if you know, comment because I feel like
It
MR's
doesn't
twin
matter.
fin
No.
was like it was like 80,
Oh,
80.
Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mark Richards was
78,
late
79,
70s.
80.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark Richards was 78, 79,
Mhm.
80. It's before thrusters.
Right.
That's what it was. So then Tommy would have been in the middle 80s. I think that's more correct.
Yes.
Because Tommy's only like
Mhm.
10 years younger 12 years younger than me.
Right. He
You know,
was.
people
exactly.
don't realize that, but he's like a little kid. We all grew up together. But regardless of all that, the 90s is what we're talking about.
Yes.
So the thruster is invented by 82 by Simon Anderson. We all know that. Well, now we've progressed through the beautiful surfing of Tommy Curran. He's the greatest modern surfer, will never be duplicated. He's a single fin surfer, so he knows everything about wave positioning and flow like no other. Only a single fin can teach you that. So he rides thrusters, but he doesn't ride them like anyone else because he can ride anything. He started on twin fins after singles and then went to tries. And now Kelly Slater, who idolizes Tommy, is now coming up, and he's the new world champion. So now enter the 1991, and that was my first glider, 11-foot glider in 1991, because Skip Fry was so inspired by Duke Hanamoku, who was the famous story of the Duke, riding his 16-foot long Olo. That's a very famous story that he rode outside castles in Waikiki, and he rode a wave for a mile.
A mile?
Yes, and there's a picture of him. You see, it's in here of him holding the board. It's on postcards. It's a famous
Is that a
picture.
mile straight?
Of course, on a 16-footer.
All the way like.
There's no
I think the
S-ring.
board rode him.
So Skip was so inspired that he started making his double eagles, his 12-footers, and he's riding San Onofre, and he just was completely rejuvenated. Well, simultaneously, and I'm a single fin guy, and so nobody rides single fins. I'm quite sure I'm the only one who rode, other than a longboard contest. No one rode a single fin in Northern California, but we moved up here in 1980, so I was the only one that owned one and rode them. So I make my first 11-foot glider, and I've been riding them ever since. That was 1991. That was the period of the glass slipper.
Oh, we love the glass
Kelly
slipper.
Slater.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Banana rocker, 6'1", 18 inches wide, 2 1/16 inches thick,
He ruined my surfing.
nose to tail.
I tried to ride what he was riding, and it ruined my surfing. I'm still pissed. I know it. It ruined surfing. Because only
Nose-
Kelly can ride those.
Nose to tail, concave. Okay? And so, during that period, I was telling Pete, during that period, everybody rode them. You and everybody rode them. And I,
Attempted to ride him.
Well, you
Well,
could barely sit on them. You're like
guys-
up to your neck,
Yeah.
sitting on them.
but you had to take off after the wave was thoroughly top to bottom, and you take off under the lip. And so everybody rode the inside ledge, and nobody rode outside natural bridges. They didn't ride Swift Street. They didn't ride outside Lane. They didn't ride First Peak when it was big. Nobody was Surf Point Arena. Nobody rode anywhere except me. So I surfed really, my greatest surfing years were the first half of the 90s before Blue Crush came out and surfing population doubled by 95.
Right.
So I had like 4 years, it was really more like 6 or 7 before it got busy. And I just rode my gliders. And so anyway, this lineage shows you the lineage of the longboard. So the 16-foot Olo becomes the 11-foot glider. That's the full circle. This is the whole
Got it.
lineage of longboards.
Right.
I feel like Vince Collier was doing your secret during that time too, because he made a couple of giant boards and just screwed with everybody.
Yeah.
Because that was when kind of the Mavs thing was kind of starting to.
That's another. I mean, I could talk about that as well, because that's when Mavericks is first discovered.
Right, and Vince is
And-
the only one who had a board in our town.
Right. Right.
And
So that's the gun page. We can skip ahead to that.
I love it.
Ho!
What the heck is that thing?
That's an 18-foot long Olo made by Tom Wegener for Dave Rostovich. And
Wow.
it weighed 200 pounds. My friend Bob Leonelli took that photo. I picked the board up and was trying to hold it, and I almost got crushed to death by it. It was starting to fall, and Dave ran over and grabbed the other side of it so that I didn't get killed by it. And I'll never forget, that's the heaviest thing I've ever seen.
You just scream at people to get out of your way when you ride
Oh,
that? Is that
it's
what
just-
you do? Get out of the way! I'm
It's
coming
just-
through.
Casualties.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a classic. But every board is described
Is that a
in here.
balsa board?
No,
you
no,
said?
that's Polonia.
Oh, okay.
That's Polonia. But the gun period, let's see, let's go to the guns.
Boom.
Gun lineage. It actually starts with the same Olo that the Duke rode. It's 16 feet long because he rode a 20-foot wave at Castles. He rode a big
On
wave
that
on
thing?
it. Yes. The Duke Hanamoku is one of the greatest athletes and
Right.
the founder of all surfing and aloha, period. Number one, the godfather of
Also,
surfing.
he can swim like a fish. And when you lose that thing, you better swim
Gold,
fast.
gold medal Olympian.
Yeah.
Right.
So, anyway, this goes through, the modern to the thruster gun, but, really this brewer gun
The brewer.
period is when, and of course, I still live in Half Moon Bay. I live across, I could look out my window on that Mavericks ball. I always laugh because if anyone shouldn't live across the street from Mavericks, it would be me. But I do. But I know all those guys, and I've known Jeff Clark since he was 12 because I used to make his boards when he was a kid. Because I spent a summer up at Dad's, we both did, up in San Mateo. We were raised in Santa Barbara, but we're born there. So we'd come back and see our dad. Parents split up when we were little kids.
Gotcha.
So anyway, Jeff tried to get all of us to surf there. And of course, you well know the story about all the Santa Cruz guys, the
Right.
Schmidt brothers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And,
Tom Power.
and Tom Powers, who were all
Yeah,
friends.
Tom Powers, yeah, and Big Bird were the first. And,
Yes.
Well, what interesting, just a quick
Yeah.
step about that is I used to sponsor Jeff Clark for wetsuits before he told those guys about Mavericks, and we would do contests up the coast, and Jeff would have to bring his boards down to the beach because they didn't fit in his car. So we'd be doing this contest at Lagunas in the shore pound,
Right.
and here comes Jeff walking down the beach with these 2 10 or 11-foot boards.
Right.
We thought he was the biggest kook on the planet. We're like, Jeff, what are you doing with these giant, dumb boards? We didn't even know Mavericks existed then.
Right.
And a gun was like a 7.2
Right.
back then, like that was a gun. So to
Right.
see him carry these big boards, and then he'd go back to his car and come down with his regular surfboard, surf in the contest, and then load it all up and drive home. But it was an interesting time because nobody knew.
We did because everyone we were there every summer since the 60s visiting our dad. So we surfed the coast because we get our parents to drive over 92 and we'd come down to Santa Cruz and we surfed all this, White Oak Creek and Año Nuevo and the jetty and all that stuff. And Swanton.
Well, it's interesting
Yeah.
too because you pretty much drove through. Because I was raised in Marin County,
Oh, well, you
and
know.
you drove through San Mateo County.
Right.
And didn't surf till you got to Santa Cruz County. Pretty
Right.
much, that was kind of a rule of thumb. Even though,
Yeah.
as we know, there's surf spots, they just were kind of a no man's land during
Nobody
that time.
surfed it, really.
Yeah, no one really surfed there. And you get
Right.
to like Año and then County Line and Waddell and so forth, people started surfing those spots. But it was really a weird time.
But in the 60s, they were unsurfed.
Yeah.
We surfed them, and a few people maybe did occasionally, but they were unsurfed, and we surfed them. But it was a really cool time. But because we were around, I knew Jeff would have been 1970. I think was the year I spent the summer there, and I made a bunch of boards with Robert Johnson, who was a boat builder in Half Moon Bay, and he's a laminator. He said, "Hey, come shape for me," because I made all my boards from scratch. And they said, "Wow, somebody knows how to shape." I never used a power tool. Everything was by hand. We were so poor. We
Just
had
like-
no money, nothing.
You
And
were
so
shaped with like 40
with the
grit or
shirt-
something? Or
No,
no,
the
shirt
shirt
form? Gotcha.
I bought my materials from John Mell. I'd come down
Uh-huh.
41st and get all my blank and resin and glass and go home and make a board every week. And so that's how I knew Jeff. So all through the years, when I'd be up and he'd see me, he took me out like every other one. He took everybody to the bluff to look at Mavericks and wanted us to surf with them. But this all happened after surf leashes, not before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was about 75, roughly, when people were actually accepting them. And so after the surf leash, so he surfed there from the late 70s and for 15 years alone. It's all true.
Mm-hmm.
We all went up there and looked at it. Like, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard. Why would anyone surf there?
Right.
Because we surfed in the 70s, we already talked about it. You go to the North Shore. We're career surfers.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the North Shore. Pipeline, Sunset. I would not surf Waimea. Me and Barnfield. And so you lose your board every frickin' wave and get annihilated, and you just swim in and get it and go back out and do it again.
It wasn't the rocks.
You didn't have leashes.
Right.
Or any of that. But
Well, the
you had a
interesting
sandy
thing
beach.
about Mavericks is that during that era, when Mavericks was surfable and good, every spot on the coast was firing. You know, so it wasn't like
we
that was the
weren't
only
going to go
good.
there.
Yeah, so there was everything else is on fire because it's so
yeah.
exposed to the weather and wind
Right.
that if it's good,
Right.
Yeah,
the whole coast is on fire.
right.
And that just made it easy to go somewhere else.
I know. And we did. We never would stay. We wouldn't surf there anyway. I was so
Why
thankful
Why would you
that
surf there?
well, because when I moved up there, first of all, you have to live here.
Yeah.
And I didn't move up until the 80s, so I was already in my 30s. And by the time I even started thinking about it, I was in my at least 40.
Yeah.
And young family, I'm
Yeah,
surfing
no.
2 hours a week. It's like I was making boards for the Mavericks guys then. I used to work. I had a key to Jeff's shop. I mean, I always worked at Hout since 1980. I've been there, but I had a key to Jeff's shop, and I'd go in there and help him. I'd glass a few of my boards if I wanted to get them done quick, and I'd glass a few of his. And we were friends, so I got a lot of exchange with him and board design. And his guns were really good. He made beautiful single fin 10.6s. And I was making boards for a lot of the Mavericks guys then. I don't know what years. This is early 90s. This is 90s.
Yeah.
Pure 90s,
We're doing 90s.
And so I'm riding gliders. I'm surfing big waves, which is everywhere else,
Right.
right? When it's Mavericks is big, I'm every other spot. But when it's at its best, when it's biggest, and I'm riding my gliders. So I was really into it. I said, I should just surf Mavericks. I surf big waves. But 5 years in a row, I'm going to do it. I make myself a board. And then you'd watch the Power Lines films, the boys.
Kurt.
Yeah, Kurt. And I'd watch, and there'd be this wave, and it'd just start eating the wave in front of it. They'd show it in slow motion, and these guys with the boards tombstoning. I go, oh my God, what am I thinking? It's like, I thought, you know what?
Yeah.
After the 5th year, I said, I can give myself a pass because I surfed the biggest waves that people rode in my period when I was in my 20s. So I already did it. I don't need to do it.
No, you
And I
had
gave
nothing to
myself
prove.
a
You had
pass.
nothing to prove.
No.
No.
So I gave myself a pass, and I really didn't believe that I was in shape
Yeah. But you got
to do that.
Well, and it's so different today. Back
dangerous.
during the days you're talking about, there was a crowded day was 18 guys or 12 guys or
12.
right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Now there's 70 people
No,
sometimes.
yeah,
So
no, that's
the
true.
risk, and I always say
Yeah, so
it's
true.
gotten to the point now where people are going to ride waves they really shouldn't be ridden.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the thing out there because that's all you're going to get. You're the leftover guy.
Yeah.
Whereas the area you're talking about, you
Yeah.
can actually get a rideable
So,
wave.
you see, I know Mark's going to go because it's 7 o'clock, right? Cut-off time, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
No. Hang on. About TC's here. TC and I always ask our seasoned guest a two-part question.
No, it's
Well,
fine.
we should
Yeah.
ask both of them because
Yeah.
we have seasoned
So we're
guests.
blessed to have
Yeah, it's a nice way to say you're old.
So why don't you do the first part?
Okay, all right. So the first part of our we're going to switch up on the next question. The first question, and those of you who watch the show know, we ask this.
A seasoned
First
guest.
off, we're going to talk about your favorite decade surfing and why. And Mark, you'll go first. Your favorite decade.
This is so weird. So think about this. 60s. I mean, that's the golden era. 70s. that was pretty cool because we're
Awesome.
building our own boards and sorting all these designs. 80s, we hated professional surfing because we were like hardcore underground black wetsuit clear board guys from Santa Barbara. 90s, Mavericks, big wave surfing. 2000s, and now 2020. Do I have that right?
The tens.
So I think that's 6 decades, right?
Yeah.
Of surfing. And for me, I know this sounds weird, but the 90s, I already described it. My favorite time surfing was the 90s. It was the least crowded because the crowds was really crowded in the 60s. And when shortboards came out, half of the people quit because they were recreational and they had to quit. So no one's in the water. You had to be damn serious to be riding a 5'10" 2 years after you were on a longboard. So that cut the crowds, but it was a bunch of nasty, unsavory individuals that you're surfing with, right? And we all know them because all of them were our buddies.
Oh yeah.
And when you're at the beach down the street, they weren't your buddies. And so, that wasn't that much fun. And then the 80s, that was kind of work and family. I had Scotts Creek. I was part of with Tom Powers. That's how I met Tom and Randy. I met all those guys in the 70s or 80s. But 80s is when I lived here, so I surfed there all the time. So that was cool, pretty quiet. And but the 90s, for me, I felt like what Skip Fry described. His surfing was so rejuvenated because we're longboarders at heart. So gliding and that high pocket trim and just the momentum of that board taking you for a ride. There's something really magic about it, and it reminds you of your childhood. So for me, when I started riding gliders in the 90s, and I never cared about, actually you never want to be popular. That's always a bad thing, So I didn't care. I was just not trying to get business. I always made boards for people, but nobody cared about this stuff. But I just so connected to it. And I had all those 4 or 5, it was really more like 6 or 7 years of the most beautiful, uncrowded, never more than 2 or 3 guys on the best days of the year riding the outside waves.
90s.
Right.
In the 90s.
Yeah, right.
And nobody it's at least 90 yards between you and where everyone else was on their glass slipper boards. They didn't even know I was out. And I'm not interfering with their waves. They don't even know that there's waves out there.
Well, it's interesting too because also that time, like Second Peak wasn't really a longboard spot back then. Like it was where the shortboarders that couldn't get away with Sewer Peak or First Peak hung out.
Right.
And that's completely changed. So if you were the one guy out there on a little longer glider,
right,
it was you were.
But I loved the days when it was so big there was no First Peak or Sewer Peak.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm talking about those are the days I surfed. So it would be macking, but perfect.
Right.
And there's the 2 guys out. Right.
The big New
and
Zealander.
And there's always a couple of, Santa Cruz is like every other really cool town. There's some just crazy characters that come out of the woodwork, on a certain day, and they usually have some board with half of it missing. And they're just animals,
Right.
It's classic.
Well, when I was growing up here, it was a guy named Jim Denovan.
Yeah, Jim.
Would sit outside, and you just saw this guy bobbing on the very outside.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like when we needed, it was pre internet wave checking. If we wanted a surf report, we'd get it from Jim. He'd be like, next Tuesday. Be ready next Tuesday. He was that guy.
Yeah, I love it.
And we wouldn't even know he was out, but he'd be so far out. And sure enough, he'd stroke into it and catch the bombs.
So it's
Pat,
for you.
Pat Arco was one of those.
Oh, Pat
guys.
Arco's
Pat
same.
Arco.
Yeah.
Wow.
He always had like an 8.8 when we're all on our 7.2s, and he was harvesting constantly.
Yeah.
And there's nobody surfing. I mean, it's like everywhere was uncrowded then. It was just amazing. So anyway, that's
we
the
do
long
this
answer
show.
to a
So
short
for you,
question.
go
Well,
ahead.
we do this show because we want to hear from Pat Arcos,
Right.
even though Pat Arco is no longer with us.
Right.
But we want to record
Yes.
because I wish we could have recorded Pat Arco's
Oh, yeah.
story.
What a character.
Total
Yeah,
character,
yeah.
And I knew Pat Arco, and
Yeah,
so that's why when we started this, we want to
He
talk
surfed
about
everywhere. he was at Waddell, everywhere you'd
Yeah.
run into him. And
Yeah.
he was always just having so much fun
Yeah.
on his
How
long
How
boards.
about Lars?
Lars
Oh,
from Mars.
Lars from Mars.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for you,
What a classic.
So for you, it's the '90s.
Yeah.
Pete,
Pete, you're up.
your decade.
Your decade and why?
Right now.
People say
We
that
do
shit.
hear that. Actually, about
Right
50%.
now.
Wait a minute, I'm going to do a fact check on that.
Yeah.
Where's the computer?
It could be a lie.
Worst time
yeah.
to be a surfer.
Huh?
Worst time to be a surfer.
Wait.
Right now.
There's freaking talk about Blue Crush and the explosion, and then the COVID explosion. It's like people didn't work and they all got a soft top and surfed.
Yeah.
Now they're graduating to a hard top, they call them, you know, and they're just like so aggressive, and they're watching videos and they're taking surf lessons, and they're just, you know.
So why are you saying now? Why is
it's
now?
total chaos because you have to adapt.
Okay.
Just like when there was nobody out, you had to, like when you're alone and it's big, you got to figure out how to get out, how to, you know, go, you know, find the right spot to take off. If you're too far over there, you don't catch it. If you're too far over here, you better, you know, be in the right spot. And so it's, I mean, those were all good periods. When I was in my 20s, that was my heyday of performance surfing, and now I just love getting in the water so much. It's right now.
Right now.
That's a common
Good.
theme. We
You
do.
know what?
been-
I was the one that's always lying.
Fact check. Okay, Neil. Question number 2. Are you ready?
This time, I'm not lying.
This time I'm telling the truth.
Question right here. Part B of the
Part
question.
B. Part 2.
You need to tell us, Mark, your favorite day of surfing.
The one day,
Your favorite day.
your last
Oh, that's
breath, you'll
that-
remember.
You know, that's a really great question. But for actual just wave riding,
Just the day
Just
it
the
pops
day.
up. Yeah.
well, there's a day that instantly pops up. There's 2 of them, but I'll just tell you about the one that was more about just surfing. The first one's in the book. It's the day I spent with Greeno at the ranch in '66.
Oh, yeah.
But that's an old story and it's in print. But I would say that my favorite day of surfing, which instantly always pops up, is at Raglan.
Yeah.
It was 15 years ago, before I broke my back and was all compromised, and I was riding the finest surfboard I ever owned, which he has now. I can't ride it anymore. It's too thin. It is a 10-foot pintail hull. I mean, a radical hull. And it's super light, epoxy. And my wife and I went to Western Oz, spent 8 days on the Cape to Cape, you know, through Margaret River, went to every beach, surfed, epic surf there. Then we spent a week, we rented a little house on top of, not Manu Bay where everybody surfs, but up by this, the top point indicator, the real wave. That's the real wave. We're there, and I mean, it was so freaking big. The swell was just enormous. And it's like, I don't know how to get out in the water. I mean, the first day I just paddled to the boat channel and surfed the bottom of it, you know, got a few waves way inside. But then I figured out, oh, you surf up there, you know. And so I rode that pintail, and I'm backside, you know, on a left.
Which is
and I
the
love
perfect
going
spot. Which
backside.
Rag's left.
So yeah,
Perfect.
it's a perfect wave. But that was my greatest day of surfing. It was 6 to 8 feet, and the waves were about 500 yards long, and they
Just
were so
500
fast,
yards.
but they were so fast you could only make, I'd say, 2 out of 3, and all the guys out, because nobody rides 10-foot boards. When I traveled all those years, nobody's riding a 9 or 10-foot single fin.
What a pain in
Anywhere
the
in
ass
the world.
traveling with a 10-foot board
Oh,
in
I
New Zealand.
didn't mind it one bit. Air New Zealand didn't care.
So
They
it was
had
free back
no
then, right?
restrictions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's free.
Right.
You could bring anything. So I got my pintail, and everybody, I made so many friends. That's how I met a lot of the people I know in these countries. I met because what's that? And we just make friends, you know, because they never even seen a board like that. They're just unknown in the rest of the world.
And then you paddle out, catch every wave, and you're not friends
well,
anymore?
they're like, I'm never a wave hog.
Okay.
So
Fact check?
That's true.
Okay, fact check. It's true.
Unless he's burning me.
Oh,
that's different.
Your favorite day?
Favorite day of all time, it's really hard. There's a half a dozen, but I'd say Ocean Beach, a late swell. Back then I like to ride big Ocean Beach. And
Why? That place is just nuts.
it's
so
just
freaking
thrilling.
perfect.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Ocean Beach is awesome.
The best.
Ocean Beach.
Are you saying late fall? Is that what you were talking about?
No, late winter.
Oh, okay.
Late winter.
Mm-hmm.
It was so perfect, and it was kind of crowded, but I had my mojo on. You know, I felt so confident. I had good equipment. That really, it was a 710 board that he made just out of his head that would work for me in big waves, and I was just like, I just owned it. You know, I'd find the right one. They kind of shift over like that, and you know, it looks like, oh, I'm going to be too deep, and then you're not. You know, and you take off behind the crease, and you know, if you make it to the bottom, it's almost like an elevator drop, and then you're coming off the bottom and looking up, and that thing's just hurling. You know, and it's like, oh no, I'm a barrel dodger. Sometimes you can't.
No
dodge.
choice.
Okay, I'm pulling into this one. And it's like, I could have driven a Volkswagen bus through that thing, and it's like I come out and I'm laughing so hard. This is like time slowed down.
Right.
And then I paddle back out, and here comes another. It's like, oh, this is crazy.
But you paddle back out easily, or was it paddle back out was hard?
Well, because sometimes at Ocean Beach, when you kick out, you think you're in the channel and you're not. You know, and you're like,
time where I couldn't get back out. I took one wave. Somebody's screaming me to go, and I was like, that's just a shoulder. I don't want that one. And I went because he's screaming at me, and I couldn't get back out. But usually, I mean, I was in my 50s then, and so I never thought that you get tired out there. You know, you just keep surfing, and maybe you got too cold.
So Mark, we got today, and we've got the 90s. So can you come back again and do a show? Can we finish?
Absolutely.
We got another episode.
That's
the
fine.
The 2000s.
We're just getting warmed up.
I know. I hope you enjoyed your evening tonight.
I love sharing history. I love for people to know about it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk more next time about where all the boards came from. I think that would be a cool show.
You can talk about whatever you want.
right.
Yeah.
Well, like
I would like
mention
to
a
do
guy
that.
like
This is
Dick
stuff
Brewer.
that, this is Mark. This is
You know,
stuff that we
and
need.
the influence of a
And
brewer.
this is stuff that we need to want to record. We want to have this so it's 50 years from now people can read your book and they go back, listen to the show, and listen to history.
Most people just read all the ranch stories in here.
Yeah.
Not a lot of them really go into, because this is why I wrote the book, was for this part. Because when you're there, building them alongside the people from the generation before me, was there actively building boards. So I have, in 100 year, this covers 100 years, because surfboards only cover 100 years. The ancient boards to the thruster is the only period of time that there is, and that's really only about from the middle 50s, when they stopped riding hot curls, to the early 80s. It's barely a 35-year span. So I was physically making boards in that 50-year, in the middle of that 50 years of making boards, I was in there doing it with all these great people, because that's all there were. And so I just had a unique position in this development of the surfboard just because of the timing.
Yeah.
We lived in the right place,
Yeah.
and that was the gift that God gave me. I love surfboard. Every surfboard, I look at every line since I was a little kid, and so I could draw a template and work on it, and people go, "Wow, where'd you get that board?" I just made it. I just made it with a Surform, but it's only because your mind can see, the beauty of what a surfboard can be, and that's really all it is. I wasn't very good at executing it, but it was just that I could see it, and so. Because of that, all the boards that I've studied, even before I was making them, I remember them all like it was yesterday, and could pretty much shape one today, just from memory, from something I saw in the 60s. because I remember them so well.
Wow.
That's mentally dissect every board.
And do you have a number of boards?
I'm around 8,000.
8,000?
Right.
That's
So
a-
that's not a lot, but mine are, I'm a one-at-a-time guy from a small town.
Well, yeah, you're not
Custom
yeah,
builder,
right.
not
Yeah.
mass
You're
production.
you're the artiste, which is interesting because I ask about you, and that's the feedback I get is there's an art that you're involved in with surfboard shaping, and if you're willing to wait, right?
Well, I think here's what I want to talk about on the next show. And I hope we'll get it you in the calendar here shortly. Let's talk about the book
Okay.
and anything else you want to talk about. Yeah. But I also want to talk about what's like surfing with your brother,
Oh,
and for him to talk about what's like surfing with his brother.
yeah, you should have us in separate, like the 2 interrogation rooms.
I'm like next.
That's what I recommend.
I
You
can't
know,
wait.
you have the good
Well,
cop and the bad cop
would you
together
want
with
it-
the flashlight.
Would you want it
Come
framed?
on, tell me the truth. And the other
Yeah.
guys, don't mind him. He's just a little. He had too much coffee this morning.
I think that would be very interesting.
I know that.
Yeah.
I have brothers who surf, so it's cool.
Right.
And so,
Very cool.
folks, we'll be back with the rest of this story.
Part 4.
Mark, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Pete,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
so much.
Pleasure.
You guys are still friends?
Barely.
Sometimes.
Okay, all right. Well, that's amazing.
As long as he has gas, or I have gas,
Or gas money.
that never happens.
No, we
We
look
got
for each
music.
other.
Well, we look forward to having you guys back. So thank you again. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Neil, next week, who's coming on?
Special show this Thursday.
This Thursday.
Acoustic Minds, 2 ladies coming to town. Going to be singing right here.
Live music here at the
Live
boardroom.
music. I want to thank Mark. I want to thank Pete for coming on the show.
Thanks, you guys.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing your boards.
This is history.
Thank
that
you.
is recorded now. It's been recorded. It's there, and we're stoked to have it. We can't wait to hear the rest of the story.
That'll be awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Good night.